I'm going to hand us over now in a moment to John Cox. He is University Librarian at the National University of Ireland, Galway. He has particular interests in digital activity, digital archives, open research, and the higher education environment for libraries. Projects led include the digitisation of the Abbey and Gate Theatre archives at NUI Galway and Irish consortium negotiations with publishers aimed at increasing open access to IRIS research outputs. His publications include review articles on communicating new library roles to enable digital scholarship and positioning the academic library in the institutions. And the links to both of these will be in the chat box shortly. I'll hand it over to you now, John. Thanks.
Thanks, Elaine. Thank you very much. I hope everybody can see my slides and hear me. Hope that's the case. What I'm going to talk about is, I suppose, there's 3 P's in it: politics, persuasion, and persistence, as we reopened the library at NUI Galway. But I'm actually going to add a further P in the next slide, because I think that the people side was actually the most important of all. But I will tend to emphasize politics in the next 15 minutes as well. And also just to note, I'm not really going to talk much about archives and special collections, important though they are. I will mention them because they were vital to our reopening, but looking at the library and the university side of things in general, and the library in the university perhaps as well, how we kind of had to interplay with others in order to reopen the library. And then just the last point on that slide is around the language of reopening. Perhaps one should be avoiding, and we kind of did try not to use that word too much, because we actually never closed really as libraries generally, I think, and speaking for my own anyway, we were able to transact a lot of business digitally. So we kind of wanted to emphasize as we reopened that actually we hadn't really ever closed, and that it was important to publicize that, because while our service was compromised to some extent, we were able to do a lot, and our users were able to do a lot online or through email and other ways that we supported them. So what we're going to look at here is going to pick it up, if you like, around the 18th of May, the whole business of getting back on campus, because it was fairly unambiguous until then. We were all locked down until then. But from that point on, I suppose, the idea of reopening came onto the agenda in the library first. And something we instigated during the lockdown was to have weekly staff meetings, which were as much social as business oriented. And that was really important, to talk to people, keep them involved, but also to look at this point in particular about how we might reopen. And rather than go in and say, look, we're going to reopen on such and such a date, we had a conversation about it. And I suppose we have about 70 staff, so you're going to get a range of perspectives. There was anxiety among some, perfectly understandable. Others were itching to get back. They'd had plenty of time at home. They wanted to get out of the house. And others kind of in between. And I kind of felt overall, though, there was a desire to return. However, that had to be, qualified by a safety first policy. That's something we were also very clear on. It was a whole protocol, very lengthy protocol about how to set up the workplace post-COVID. And we had to adhere to all of that, of course. But then looking at the situation on campus, there was a reopening queue began to form, a queue for which buildings would open first. And I'm hoping you can see all of that on my slides. It looks slightly different to me, but the reopening queue was, I suppose, led by the science, technology and medicine researchers. They had research grants that were time limited. They wanted to get back, get into their labs and so on and so forth. But the research role of the library is very important in the humanities in particular. And there was a reopening research group was formed, and we were fortunate that one of our humanities research leaders, who's also the chair of our archive strategy committee, was on that group, and he really agitated strongly for the library to reopen, and particularly the archives and special collections. So having others make the case for us certainly helped, but also I found myself on the university COVID group, and I was able to get involved myself to directly lobby and make it clear the library wanted to reopen as soon as we could. I found the Dean of Graduate Studies and the Vice President and Directors of Research very supportive as well, which I think was important. And the other people that were vital in this were the buildings office. We have about 50 or 60 buildings on campus, so getting into the queue, getting in early was vital, because a big long queue was going to form. And we've worked well with the buildings office over many years on our campus. It can be trying at times, things mightn't happen as quickly as you like, and Our building isn't in the best state as well, at least our main library building. So, you know, we kind of have issues around buildings, but we've always worked closely with buildings. I'm really glad we did, because the relationship we had with them served us well. They were keen to help us get open. And in effect, we got into 6th place in the queue, which I think wasn't bad, all things considered. And what that translated into in this chronology was that on the 29th of June, we were allowed back in for behind closed doors access. So that was good. What had to happen there is we were allowed in and we're allowed to set up 2 services, click and collect and the reading room. And we also were pending the approval of our building capacity plan, because that plan was fundamental to us doing anything beyond those 2 activities. So the way it worked out was 29th of June, we got in, there was a spell of setting everything up, including one-way traffic, of course, of one-way systems, sanitizer, all those other precautions, making sure any staff that would come back were fully versed in what they needed to know and what to do. There was return to work forms, all of that stuff as well. But we got going within 2 weeks, which I think was great work by the people involved, on a click and collect service. And then the Archives and Special Collections Reading Room reopened by appointment on the 20th of July, so only 3 weeks in. So I kind of have to applaud the people there. They were very prompt in getting these things up and running, which is a fairly complicated business, as Grania had described, all the different protocols and things you have to do. And then an important milestone on the 27th of July was our building capacity plan was approved. So the good news was that gave us latitude to move forward. The bad news is it set us up with a capacity of 135 instead of 1,700. So a huge reduction in capacity there, which I suppose we knew we could work with initially, but would become a problem and is a problem as I speak. 135 is not very many for a student population of our size. And then the library opened on the 21st of August, which is that was the biggest milestone of all. We opened up to everybody. But we learned a lot through the reading room experience, of course, because that was letting people in from outside the library staff, and we kind of learned how to set that space up, which influenced how we set the library up. And then just to talk about some of the practicalities, because we're now, if you like, at 29th of July, and we had a library reopening group. We'd formed that to get us that far. And that group was kind of working away, had been, but we now moved into a different phase. I suppose the first thing to say is, as per the slide, we focused on safety at all times. We were definitely not going to cut any corners. We did take an approach of stretch by stealth, because once we got past the building capacity plan, we could do more than the reading room and click and collect. So, for example, we're able to bring some archivists in to do collection listing. We're able to expand click and collect into scan and deliver. So there was some expansion happened in a subtle way there, but we knew the big moment would be, how do we get the library open fully to users? So we formed, I think it was around the 29th of July, formed 3 groups, one on access, the other technology, and on collections as well. And so these groups had to look at, how do you let people in safely? What technology do you need, as in, say, a booking system to let them in? And also, do you let people go to use the collections, or do you stay with click and collect? So some very big decisions there. Something that impressed me greatly was that, you know, the managers really got down and dirty there. They didn't kind of hang back. And, you know, I would feel it myself. My job is normally a bit more strategic than operational, but not in this instance, because if we wanted to get open, we just had to all get stuck in and work together. And it was a fantastic experience, one of the best in my career, I'd say, in terms of the great spirit that was formed and the very pragmatic approach people took. Because I suppose what we wanted to do is we wanted to get open as soon as we could, both for our users and for us to get experience ahead of term time, which was due to start on the 28th of September. So, as I say, we were pragmatic. We generally took quick decisions, didn't agonize over budgets. We just said, you know, PPE has to be bought, screens must be purchased and installed, and so on. We had to do a lot of liaison and communication with others on campus. Of course, we couldn't just do it on our own, but what we could do on our own was done in a very direct and pragmatic and spirited way, I'd say. And then just a few observations, I suppose, about the whole process would be that we were the first service to open to non-staff users. Everything else was opened, anything that did open, I should say, opened to university staff. We were opening up to students for the first time in particular. And that brought us into new territory, all kinds of new things. I think Grania highlighted some of them, but I will mention them here. And we've never had a booking system to get into the library before. That seems strange. Then if you had a book to get into the church, I suppose it's not so strange for us either to have the same kind of system. But we installed LibCal seats, and that's been pretty successful in managing the bookings. But that was quite a big overhead, needed a fair bit of work. Also, we had to integrate a health declaration into that, where people would say, you know, the usual things that you were saying in those days. You didn't, you hadn't been away, etc. So again, something we never thought of, and we needed to liaise with the university to get that integrated, because the university hadn't set up a health declaration for students, for example. So new territory. Of course, loads of PPE, as they all got down and dirty. I was leading the access group. I learned more about hand sanitizer, never knew before, the size of the bottles, the types of sanitizer, all of that, but you know, that detail is important. We installed our Perspex screens. We decided not to allow users access to the collections. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is, you know, do we really need to go this far? You know, the library looks really strange when you're suddenly taping off the stacks. Is it a library at all, you're almost saying? But it was absolutely the right decision made by that subgroup. Of course, we didn't want to be the cause of spreading infection or risking that. So we decided to stick with click and collect, and we're still doing that. Also, something new was the idea of users cleaning their desktops before and after they used them. That was totally new to us, and we were the first on campus to be doing that. So a lot of setup there, a lot of pragmatism, a lot of challenge. And I keep using the word pragmatic, but I'm also thinking we could have agonized over, well, we have a 2-hour booking slot, a 3-hour booking slot. We just said, no, you can book the whole day, because I suppose what we knew is there would be a slow start. And even though we only had 135 spaces, they wouldn't be all used. They wouldn't be under great pressure before term time. So we just said, look, let's not agonize. If you book a space, you have it for the whole day. You won't be keeping anybody out. That's very different now, of course, but that's how we approached it then. Also, we're delighted to have some pressure around the campus from postgrads to write up and have spaces to write up theses and such like. So we had people exerting pressure on us to do that. So we said, good, we absolutely want to do it, help us to do it. So that kind of opened some doors for us and hurried things up. And as per the title of the talk, I think that those 3 Ps were big. The patients, some of the things that didn't happen as quickly as you want, you have to wait to stick with that. And the politics to work with others successfully to get the library open. And then this is what made it all worthwhile. This is we're up to the 21st of August. Our aspiration had been to open on the 17th of August, which I think was ambitious, but we just about managed it within the same week. We opened on Friday the 21st. I was lucky enough to be in the library and beside the entrance when our first user came in since the 12th of March. So it was great to greet that person. Slightly odd greeting, I might say. I wish we could have shaken hands. It would look a bit better in the photo as well. But it was just a lovely moment, I must say. And it was a chance also, as was for me on Twitter, to pay tribute to the fantastic effort of the library staff and people in the university at large to get us reopened, which is a huge milestone for us. A few takeaways, maybe just things to think about in the kind of longer term. I'm kind of thinking of the whole period now, not just up to August, but the reputation and positioning of the library here and elsewhere, I know, has advanced further. It's kind of been mentioned this morning as well. Great appreciation from users, not only on the day we reopen, but generally people are so glad we're open because not much else is open on our campus right now at level 5. But we're open. Our visibility across the campus, I think, has increased. We are certainly seen on more committees. People are very interested in what we have to say from the experience we've built up from being open and from being pretty much the only main service open at the moment. So we've contributed to that very much. We also, the fact that libraries, academic libraries, continue to be open at level 5, it's a challenge for us. It's hard work, but it's good. It's a good message. It shows we're essential and we're doing a very important social as well as research and learning role on campus, and our staff have just been fantastic. And that's kind of that point about exceptional service commitment. Those words get said fairly readily, but I highlighted exceptional because what I've seen here is that libraries really have put themselves on the line faster and in greater numbers and more readily perhaps than anywhere else on the campus. So it is exceptional. Great work by everybody. also been mentioned, could some of these changes be long-term? The remote delivery by ourselves and the remote use of services. There's been an awful lot of that happening. And users seem to like it. We seem to be able to do it. Not 100%, but a lot of the way. So I don't think some of that, it certainly won't all go away. A general digital shift in how we do our business, I think that's been accelerated through this, and I don't think it'll go away. Virtual events like the very one we're having today probably are very efficient in many ways, and they have worked out very well. So, for example, I would love to be in Dublin or wherever we'll be having this meeting today, and seeing everybody physically would be much nicer. On the other hand, I've got a meeting at 12:30 that I'd be able to get to today, so that's advantageous in its own right. And again, I just want to emphasize that the politics side of this, it really is so important to work well with other people, to be able to call in favors when you need them. And so that's because libraries have built up strong goodwill over a long period of time. And lastly, just very briefly to advertise an article I've written myself. It's still in press, but it's accessible at the URL there. If you're interested in the political climate around libraries, it's covered here, as well as more besides. Anyway, I'll stop there. I think it's just around the 15 minutes mark. I'll stop sharing as well.
Thanks very much, John. That was excellent.